Yeah, and you've had on obviously Jordan Peterson, William Lane Craig, Bart Ehrman, N.T. Wright, a lot of brilliant, brilliant minds. I'm sure you get this question quite often. But what moments or debates or discussions really stick out in your mind when you reflect on those times?
Oh yeah, it's a bit like asking me to choose between my children, honestly, because they're all so great and they're all great in different ways. I guess some of my favourites include, yeah, there was one very memorable one in 2019, which is by no means the most popular show in the archive, but it was one of my favourites, and it was the historian Tom Holland joining me to debate atheist philosopher A.C. Grayling. It was part of a series called The Big Conversation. And for those who don't know, Tom Holland has a very interesting story himself because he wasn't exactly coming on as the Christian guest, but he'd written this fantastic book, Dominion, which laid out as a secular historian his case for why essentially the moral instincts of the West come from Christianity. And I had just been reading A.C. Grayling's magnum opus at the time, A History of Philosophy. And the very opening chapters of that book kind of absolutely rip into Christianity and its history and so on. So I knew that if I could bring these two together, it would be an interesting conversation. And so it proved. The sparks really flew in that conversation. And it's one of the more kind of exciting, sparky kinds of conversations that I've had the pleasure of being in the middle of, because these were two brilliant thinkers. And it was just such an interesting conversation, especially because Tom Holland, as I say, wasn't exactly standing in as the Christian, but nevertheless, he was very much defending the way in which Christianity has shaped the West. So that was a very memorable debate to be in the middle of. But I've also really enjoyed some of the more kind of friendly, congenial kind of conversations. Again, around the same time, I went out to California and hosted an on-stage discussion between a Christian thinker called John Lennox, who's quite well known, and Dave Rubin, who's like a YouTube talk show host, sort of secular Jewish guy. And again, it was completely different to the other show I've just described, but because it was like almost, it felt like you were eavesdropping on a really interesting personal conversation. But it almost felt like, it was quite significant for Dave Rubin that there was this kind of openness to the idea of faith. He himself was going on a journey. So those two shows kind of demonstrate how different the conversations could be. And they were both really engaging and very memorable for different reasons.